Today we're going to have a look at using the new map visualization that was released in Workspace 69, and very specifically, because there is a lot of functionality in here, we are going to focus on creating a map like this one where we have individual data points defined by latitude and longitude, and specifically we are going to sort of do a speed run, and the quickest way to get from our data set to having this sort of map visualization set up, because I have found a few different ways to do this. So we're going to focus on what I've found to be the easiest and quickest method. Now, when this information or when this new map type was released by IBM, they have provided a small amount of documentation to go with it. Now, quite simply put, I did not find that information very useful for this task. I can understand where IBM have come from here. So this type of chart has so much flexibility and functionality, and a lot of it is derived by coming from third-party tools. So I think what has happened is IBM have decided not to document that part of the process, because if they started documenting how to do things in a third-party tool, they have no guarantee that it doesn't completely change tomorrow. However, it is a little bit disappointing because there's all this functionality here and we don't really have clear instructions on how to use it. Or in fact, we don't have any instructions on how to use it. So I expect I'm not doing it the perfect way, but I'm doing it a way that seems to work. So what we have to have before we get started here is number one, a data source in a cube where we have a dimension that is something like locations or business units, something that you will have a geographic identifier for. So you need for each of those points a latitude and longitude available. Otherwise, how will you map it? The other thing you'll need is to create a Mapbox account. So if you go to mapbox.com and go to the create account option, it's really simple. You provide an email address, a password, all the sort of usual stuff you expect to do. It's completely free to start with, and there's a very generous amount of requests to this website that can be done within the free account before you start having to go to a paid method. So you probably won't hit that. And if you do start getting towards that point, you will have to decide whether the benefits of what you achieve here is worth it or not. But with our Mapbox account created, what we want to do is create a CSV file. So in this CSV file, we will need the identifier. So this is the same as the element name that you are going to have in Planning Analytics. So in my case, I'm using the SQL Server Contoso sample database, and that has a store key and latitude and longitude associated with them. So I'm going to save this down as a CSV file. I'll call it Contoso lat long. And in that CSV file, what you need to make sure you do is have your latitude and longitude columns called latitude and longitude. So you do need headers in this CSV file. You can also have other columns in here. It doesn't matter if your latitude and longitude are the second and third. They could be 1000 and 1001, or maybe not. I've not quite tried it with that many columns, but you get the idea. You can have other information as well, as long as you have your identifier and the latitude and longitude. So with that CSV file, what I will do is copy it off of my virtualized environment first and put it into a folder that the internet can access. So within Mapbox, you want to go into create a map in the studio option, and it brings three things across the top here: styles, tilesets, and datasets. Now the first thing we're going to go to is datasets. And in there we have the new dataset option. So if we click that, and up the top again, we want to go to upload. Now here you can go and select your CSV file that you created. and load that up. Now this one only has 306 data points in it, but I have done this exact same process on, I think, what's the largest that I've got in here? I think this one's maybe something like, that's a lot of dots. I don't know how many. I think we're talking about 50,000 if I recall correctly. But if we go into the Contoso lat long one that we uploaded a moment ago, what this does at first, so all those 306 points we had are now mapped as points here. And if I go and select one of them, we see it's got the store key identifier in it there. So we now need to get this into a format that Planning Analytics can access. So if I go back into this screen and click our three dots here, what you want to do is export to a tile set. And I'll call my tile set the same thing. You can have whatever else you want here. Just before I click export, which is what we're going to do, just notice that you can update a connected tile set. So if you've already created one before and you have new business units, you can run through this process again and update your existing tile set. Because what we are doing here is a static list of elements. So in the real world, you are going to be getting new locations that you have in your source system coming on every month. So you might have to do this as a regular task, but update the existing tile set and then your connected maps will continue to work. But here, it's the first time I'm creating this one, so I'm going to press export. Now we see this processing section in the bottom corner while this is running through. I think generally this has been taking not a very long time. I think about 60 seconds, give or take, for a small amount of records, and maybe 120, 180 seconds for a larger amount. I've never had to wait long enough for me to get annoyed by it. And now we see that has succeeded. So if I click this option here, it will take me through to that tile set that it has created. And it looks very similar to our data set because for latitude and longitude, it is very simple. We've created nothing special or fancy here. So now we actually have the data already that Workspace can use. So this is just a way for Workspace to map our element name to a position on the map. So what we need to do is make this public. Currently it is private, so it will always be private when you first create it. But if you go up into the top right corner, the share and use option, you just click the public button here and make public. It will probably ask you for your password, which I will provide here. And now that data set is public. And keep a note of this tileset ID. So I'm going to copy that out and we'll remember that we have copied that. So if I go back to my cube view here, now, first of all, I'm only interested in data points on my map. So I know that I do not need my consolidations in here to start with. So I'll just change this to level 0. And in our toolbar, I'm going to change it from an exploration to a map. And once that renders up, there are some interesting things going on in here. So first of all, it's already mapped data points for us, but we have not given it the mapping. So what it has been able to do is decide that store 230, the only information it has there is 230. It has decided that that is a location in Namibia. And it's decided two things. It's decided that it is both a region, so what existed in the old map type as provinces. It has also decided that it is a specific location, a data point, something defined by latitude and longitude normally. Now, if again we do go to that documentation for the maps, it does tell us that they're there is a standard way things are defined with this geographic entities supported in map visualizations, and there is the map reference info. So if you don't provide anything, it will try and do an automatic mapping. Particularly good, for example, things like country codes. So if I went to the countries option in here, what we will see is I can provide it an element name of Burundi, and it will know where to plot that. Generally speaking, countries are well-known things. They also have alternative names, such as the local language spelling of the country, and those will be mapped. This is definitely missing some information, because that point that we had defined on our map, 230, I can find no reference to it whatsoever in this supported values for maps document. It doesn't even mention the fact at all that it will try and map locations. So just be aware that it will do some mapping for you. And I have no idea how it is doing some of that mapping. I have tried looking online for some sort of understanding of how the 230 number relates to this region in Namibia, and I can find nothing. So anyway, what we're going to do now is provide our own mapping so that that doesn't matter. And what I'm going to do as well, so here I'm only wanting to create a latitude and longitude map. Now this type allows us to do two things. One being regions, which is this sort of coloured polygon block, but I'm not interested in those here, so I'm going to untick that, and I'm going to just keep the points ticked, which is where we have our dots, which is what we're trying to do here. Now I am going to go into the fields section, because here we just have a load of grey dots, and there's no defining factor that makes one different from another. And the reason is, by default within fields, it has got data points for the location. So the ones where it is the subregion polygon, they were defined by colour and an extrusion height on the map, i.e. how high does that region appear in relation to others. But the points section that we're wanting to do, both the size and colour are empty by default. So I am going to just make the point colour be defined by the sales amount. So now we have some colour showing up. And I am going to make the size of the point defined by the sales quantity. So now we've got some that are bigger than others. But at this stage, my dots are still appearing in seemingly completely random places, and I don't understand why they are where they are. So I'm going to jump over to the properties section of the map. And in here, if I expand points layer, we see this Tileset ID option. So that, if I go back to the map that we made public, that is this Tileset ID here. So we want to link it through. So we will copy out that Tileset ID and we will paste it into there. Now it also needs the layer name and property name. So in this case, we only have one layer. So when we create a map tile set within Mapbox this way, we've only got one layer name, and it is this one here, Contoso that long, also up there. So I will copy that and put it in the layer name. And finally, we need the property name, which is the thing it's actually mapped on. So what does the element name from Planning Analytics relate to in here? And it is this store key field. So again, I will copy that out into property name. And if I just click somewhere else, we now have it automatically linked through. So Workspace is now connecting to Mapbox and looking up the element names we've provided and saying, where should they be positioned? So now we have a working map defined by latitude and longitude. And it was as simple as that to create. Like I say, our data within Mapbox is not connected to our source systems, so it is static. You will need to go through the process on a semi-regular basis to make sure that your new elements are also captured and displayed somewhere on here. There's a really simple way to get this sort of map up and running. And then you can spend as long as you want doing things like formatting your data in different ways, deciding what to hide. One thing specifically that I will say. So I don't see many reasons why I would have both a region and points based map displayed on the same thing at the same time. I would probably keep them separate as it becomes easier to understand what you're looking at. So on that basis, if you're only like me going to have one ticked at a time, what you can also do within the properties section under chart is untick this layer control, and then that option goes away. So the end users won't be able to tick it on and off by accident. And you've also got this search control, which is very good. So if you are using default settings and you want to do something like searching for a country, it can do that. But when you start using your own mapping from Mapbox, that doesn't work anymore. So it also makes sense to untick that and make it go away. Because if your user can't use something, don't have it show up, essentially. But have fun, go through the properties. There's a lot of stuff you can do. And like I say, with the documentation being what it is, I expect there's huge amounts of things and better ways that we can possibly do this that we just don't know about. So I really hope IBM put a little bit more information out, even if it's just the developers who were creating this, if they show us a little bit of the step-by-step of the things they were doing during the testing for how they got to where they were, that could be really useful information in getting us forward. But for now, this achieves exactly what one of my customers has been asking me for, so I will try and share it with everyone else, and hopefully you have been able to follow, and this will maybe help some people. Have a good day.